Hi, Ryed. This is Michael, and I'm looking at your email right now. Let's see what we have. You say, "Dear Michael, I have a big problem I really want your help to solve." Notice here where you have that, you don't need to put it here because that pronoun kind of replaces it. So listen to the lectures in the speaking section. I get distracted while I'm taking notes. I also tried to just listen without taking notes, but that did not help me because I forget. Also, I tried to take fewer notes, but that also affected my speaking because the notes become so difficult to organize. Please provide me with some tips how I can keep concentrating to the listening while I'm taking notes. I only have this problem with the speaking section. Okay, fair enough. To help you improve your note taking, it's important to understand these integrated speaking tasks and what you're trying to do during these tasks. So I'm going to go over part of a lesson that I've written over at my website at Better TOEFL Scores. It says during these integrated speaking tasks, you will need to accurately summarize the main ideas and the most important points. So, Rayed, when it says summarize, it means you don't need to write everything down. You need to focus on the most important points. Your summary should not include your opinion or analysis of the text. Since you only have 60 seconds to discuss the passage, your speaking response should present a condensed version of the text. You should use your own words and your own grammar as you summarize. Okay, so here's some tips for speaking tasks 2 through 3. Quickly read through the reading passage and jot down its most important points. This is the first part a lot of people don't get, is they don't write down any information from the reading, because once you have the reading written down, then it's easier as you do the listening because you simply need to see how the listening passage relates to the points you've already written down. Then as you listen, write about what the passage does. For example, does the passage add to, give an example to further illustrate, or contradict the points in the reading passage? Make sure that you show how the information in the listening passage relates to the information in the reading passage. Okay, so for integrated speaking task 4, take notes as you listen. Make sure you identify the thesis or purpose of the passage. Then show how the support points in the passage relate to the thesis or purpose of the listening passage. So for integrated speaking task number 2, I'll explain a little bit more here. It says you'll typically read a 100-word passage about a new policy on a university campus. Then a student will discuss the new policy. As you take the notes, you should focus on 1, what the policy is according to the reading passage, and 2, what the student's opinions are about the new policy. I advise that you take some notes on a sheet of paper. On the left column of the paper, focus on the most important points from the reading passage, as you can see here. On the right-hand column, focus on the most important points from the listening passage. So this is kind of what it looks like. So for the reading, in terms of these notes, new policy about expanding the duration of the final exams. So final exam week is extended from 3 to 5 days. Number 1, more time to prepare for tests. Number 2, avoid scheduling too many final exams in the same day, 1 final exam per day. So you want to make sure that you have these notes here. This is important because then when you listen to the passage, you see how you have student A here likes the policy and presents 2 reasons why. Student B does not like the policy and explain 2 reasons why here. So if you have your notes organized something like this, it'll be pretty easy for you to use these notes and then deliver your response in an organized, complete, and accurate fashion. Let's talk about integrated speaking task number 3. So you will read a passage and listen to a lecture. However, this task is academic and much more difficult than the previous integrated speaking task number 2. So the reading passage will introduce an academic concept, then the speaker will use an example to further illustrate the idea. When organizing your notes, take the definition and any other relevant information and write it down on a sheet of paper, much like you did with integrated task number 2. I need to update this page. It should be 2 here, not 3. In addition, you should pay close attention to the example that professor gives in the lecture and jot down that information in your notes. So again, don't forget the reading passage. So your notes look something like this. Reading gives a definition of camouflage. Then you have 2 different definitions. Ability for animals to blend in. The skin or fur of animals can change so it matches the colors of the landscape. Then the listening, the professor introduces an animal called the Arctic fox. And then you have 3 different points about the Arctic fox. So, and this shows how this information relates back to the information in the reading passage. So it's going to look something like that. So with integrated task number 4, you have a professor that the professor defines an academic concept, and then he or she gives 2 specific examples to further clarify the concept. Or the professor will explain 2 support points to elaborate on the concept more. As a result, you need to jot down in note form the definition, plus the examples or details that the professor provides. So you focus first on what the definition is. For example, you have the listening. Professor defines a concept of creativity, associates it with 2 key concepts. So you have the definition, then you have how it relates to originality and appropriateness, right? So this would be a good way for you to organize your notes here. Okay, so once you have a pretty good idea of what's happening in these speaking tasks and how you can jot down notes on a sheet of paper, it's also helpful to understand some what we call templates, which are ways of organizing these speaking tasks. Now, to keep your ideas organized, you should create some unique templates that you can use to help you structure your ideas. I will provide some example templates in this video. However, do not memorize these templates. Don't do it. Rather, use them as a guide as you organize and create your own. So again, anybody at YouTube watching this, remember, if there's 10,000 people going to my blog and they're copying exactly these templates, then it's going to appear on the TOEFL exam and the IBT human raters are going to recognize them. It's not going to look like it's original. So don't do that. You need to create your own templates. Anybody watching this at YouTube or Raed who is watching the video right now. Okay, so here is a way to structure it. Remember, create your own. The reading passage contains an announcement or letter, article about blah, and the speaker in the lecture agrees or disagrees with blah, blah, blah. First of all, the reading passage explains blah, 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 in addition, blah, blah, blah. Second of all, the speaker in the passage agrees or disagrees with blah, blah, blah. The speaker claims that blah, blah, blah. In addition, he or she believes that. And therefore, these are the reasons why the speaker believes this is or isn't a good idea. So you want to make sure that you have a template. The template makes it easier on test day because then you take your notes and you put it into the template as you complete your response. Here's what a model response looks like using this template. The reading passage contains an announcement about parking fees on campus, and the speaker in the passage disagrees with the new policy. First of all, the passage explains that student parking fees will double next semester from the current price of $75 to $100. In addition, university officials justify the tuition increase in that they hope students will be more motivated to carpool. Second of all, the speaker in the passage disagrees with the dramatic increase in parking fees. The speaker explains that many students have part-time jobs while attending school, so they are unable to carpool with others since they go directly to work after attending their classes. In addition, he believes the parking fee increases will force students to have to work more hours, which will give them less time for studying. Therefore, these are the reasons why the speaker believes that the parking fee increase isn't a good idea. Okay, let's take a look at the template for TOEFL integrated speaking task number 3. The reading passage explains an academic concept called blah, 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 and the professor in the lecture gives 2 examples to further illustrate the idea. Then blah, 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 according to the reading passage, is described as blah, 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 furthermore, blah, blah, blah. Moreover, the professor in the lecture clarifies the concept of blah, blah, blah further by giving 2 specific examples. Firstly, the professor explains that blah, blah, blah. Secondly, blah, 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 according to the professor, blah, blah, blah. And to sum up, the professor shows through these 2 examples that blah, blah, blah. So that would be a template for speaking task number 3. So remember, you should create your own template. Just this gives you a general idea of how to structure it, but do one that you have created that no one else has seen. That's my recommendation there. Okay, let's take a look at a model response. A model response for integrated speaking task number 3. The reading passage explains an academic concept called nonverbal communication, and the professor in the lecture gives 2 examples to further illustrate the idea. Nonverbal communication, according to the reading passage, is described as any type of communication without words. Furthermore, smiling, frowning, nodding, shaking hands, and waving hands are all considered forms of nonverbal communication. Moreover, the professor in the lecture clarifies the concept of nonverbal communication further by giving 2 specific examples. Firstly, the professor explains that nonverbal communication can happen without intent. For example, a person who furrows his eyebrows can inadvertently send a message to someone else that he or she may be upset. Secondly, nonverbal communication, according to the professor, cannot occur unless it's sending an implicit message to someone else. Therefore, if no one else is there to interpret these emotions, then no nonverbal communication is taking place. Okay, that gives you a general idea there. So the template for speaking task number 4, the listening, speaking, academic, you have in the lecture, the professor introduces an academic concept called blah, 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 and then presents 2 examples to explain the idea further. This should not have the D here. It should be an academic concept. The concept called blah, blah, blah describes a professor, blah, blah, blah. The professor uses 2 examples to further illustrate the concept. In the first example, blah, blah, blah. In the second example, blah, blah, blah. To sum up, blah, blah, blah. So it looks something like that. So then if you want to see a model response for integrated task number 4, it'll look like this. In the lecture, the professor introduces an academic concept called creativity and then presents 2 examples to explain the idea further. The concept called creativity describes a professor is the use of the imagination to create original ideas. The professor uses 2 examples to further illustrate the concept. In the first example, the professor explains how his daughter came up with the idea of having a tea party with her stuffed animals. His daughter's actions are considered creative since the idea his daughter came up with was not a normal, everyday activity. In the second example, the professor explains how his son invented a game called tag when the family members are trying to think of some type of outside activity. Because the kid's idea was appropriate to what the family members were thinking, it is also considered as a form of creativity. To sum up, according to the professor, ideas must be both original and appropriate for them to be considered creative. And there you go, Red. So in this video, I went over some general ideas on how you can summarize integrated speaking task number 2, 3, and 4. And right after that, I showed you some ways that you can note take on a sheet of paper by putting information from the reading on one side and information from the listening on the other side. Finally, I gave you some templates, and I cautioned you to use your own templates, but by using templates, it makes it much easier for you to take your notes and to organize them into those templates so you're delivering organized, coherent, complete, and accurate responses. So I hope that this video is giving you some ideas on how you can improve your note taking and make better use of your notes during integrated tasks number 2, 3, and 4.